Welcome to Kerusi Panas, Sabah. This is episode 3, Sabah Goes to Polls. It's less than 1 month before the Sabah election and about 2 weeks now before nomination day. There's clearly a lot to talk about. I think it's important for us to dissect who are the players, the personalities, and what are the drivers of what's going on in Sabah politics. Let's start with recognizing that in Sabah's complexity, there is beauty and diversity that gives voters tremendous choice. There are essentially 5 different coalitions and 3 major parties separate from these coalitions that are very interesting to watch. Let me unpack who they are. The dominant coalition in this election, the one who I think is the most favored in terms of winning the most seats from the ground analysis I've done so far, is Gagasan Rakyat Sabah. That is led by Haji Jinor. This particular coalition is comprised of 2 major political parties. There are other parties as well, but the 2 that count the most are PGRS, which is Hajiji Party, and PBS, which has traditionally represented the KDM community and played a major role in the Sabah politics historically from the 1980s, leading government, shaping the nation's dynamics of Sabah, playing a more democratic role in Malaysian politics. We also see the other dominant coalition in Sabah politics has been Barisan Nasional. That has predominantly been UMNO, but also comprised of other parties that have sometimes joined them, sometimes left them, sometimes still in them. The major party that is still in them is PBRS, led by Arthur Kurup, representing many of the interior areas around Pensiangan, representing particularly the Dusun and Lorong communities, but also others. The third coalition is that of Pakatan Harapan. Pakatan Harapan's entry into Sabah politics has been somewhat later in the game compared to the others. UMNO, for example, came into Sabah politics in the 1990s. We now see Pakatan Harapan coming into Sabah politics in the 2000s. Pakatan Harapan is interesting in that it may not be running as a coalition. The individual parties are running under their own flags, it looks like, particularly UPCO and DAP. But Pakatan Harapan is comprised of PKR, DAP, and for now, UPCO. The 3 different parties are all linked to the federal government, but also have very strong local roots. The leader of Pakatan Harapan is Anwar Ibrahim, and PKR is the dominant party from the perspective of contesting in the number of seats, although likely among those to have the biggest challenge of winning seats. The other key coalition that has garnered attention in Sabah politics is that of the Solo Coalition. That is parties that have completely no link to federal government parties. That is led by STAR, by a traditional, very prominent warlord leader, Jeffrey Kittinghan, in collaboration with SAPP, which is led by Young Tegvi, particularly contesting in the more urban areas. SAPP is also an older party in Sabah politics and continues to play a role of setting agenda and commenting on many different sets of issues. A new coalition in Sabah politics and has been playing a role for the last few years is Pakatan Nasional. Some of the members of parliament have been important in terms of representing. For example, Ronald Candy in Biluran is a representative of Pakatan Nasional. Bersatu also emerged important in 2020, where Muhyiddin Yassin was an important player working at that time to transform and change the government of Shafi Abdul, who governed between 2018 and 2020. Pakatan Nasional number of seats they're contesting is still yet being negotiated, but clearly both PAS and Bersatu are contesting. I'm watching in particular Bersatu's competition in the northeast part of Sabah, where Ronald Candy has the strongest political base. PAS, of course, will play what I have written about as a political spoiler role, but they are also contesting in quite a few seats, particularly in the Muslim-majority areas around many of the cities. Not to be left out is the important role of the party-only candidacy of Warisan. Warisan is contesting in all 73 seats. This party emerged in 2018 and has played a very prominent role of shaping Sabah politics. It's led by Shafi Abdel. Political base is concentrated on the East Coast, but it has also won urban seats and some important seats on the West Coast. It is trying to garner a very high level of political support as it aims to form government. We'll see whether or not that can happen. I think they do have a tall task in that goal. Other key players that often aren't recognized, KDM party, which has basically been a party for political warlords, particularly concentrated in the north, and previously in a seat called Melalap, led by Peter Anthony. Now a new grouping of independent candidates contesting largely in the Momogun areas called Black Wave. So what we're looking at in Sabah is about 15 different major political parties in these different coalitions. Some people find it hard to keep a list of all the different parties, but in fact, we often see news reports listing the parties incorrectly. But we've got some very important players that people shouldn't forget. PGRS, PBS, PGR, UMNO, UPCO, DAP, PBRS, Warisan, STAR, Bersatu, SAPP, KDM. On top of this, some smaller parties, such as USNO, led by Pandikar Amin, also PCS, led by Anifa Aman, both of which are going to try to contest in some seats. Then we have a lot of what I call mosquito parties. Smaller parties, such as Party Impian Sabah, Party Anak Negeri, where in some of the seats were personalities in the more rural, semi-rural areas. So what we're looking at is a lot of parties, a lot of coalitions, a lot of choice for voters, but a lot to keep up with if you're focusing on the dynamics on the ground. What makes these discussion of parties more interesting and perhaps different in Malaysian politics compared to the past is that we have a lot of pre-coalition deal-making. The consummate deal-maker Anwar Ibrahim, Pakatan Harapan, has made a deal with GRS over certain sets of seats, or at least they're trying to consolidate a deal at this time web recording, as well as Pakatan Harapan has worked to negotiate with Barisan Nasional. This basically helps to increase the chances of different coalitions by reducing some of the competition. It builds on the idea that we saw in the state election of voter transferability, where voters expected to transfer their votes to the other coalition partners. It's not so clear how much of that's going to happen in Sabah, vote transferability, but what's interesting is that we do see these deals taking place. But there is a predominant force of which I call the Sabahan way, which is that Sabahans, being the friendly, wonderful people that they are, believe in contesting. We're going to see many of these deals may not be honored. There'll be a lot of friendly and sometimes a little bit unfriendly contest on the ground. Expect minimum 4 to 5 different candidates in each of the seats. In some seats already we hear about 10 or 11. We've got a lot of players and a lot of individuals that are contesting. The deals, however, have created a lot of friction among different political parties. They've created a sense that some parties are being boxed in. It limits their capacity to field new candidates to regenerate. It weights heavily to incumbency. We can see GRS is fielding a lot of its incumbents, many of them very older men. So it has had a dynamic where some people feel that the choices are really not that much. Often we hear from voters in my conversations across Sabah that there's really no choice. They're all the same. And some people will say they're confused because they can't understand how they're working together. It was quite an interesting, complex dynamic. Amidst this, we have very powerful personalities. The questions of who is going to become the CM is often on people's minds, of the different leaders and contenders. Shafi Abdel, Haji Dor, even PKR is slating its own potential CM candidate, Ruji and Meratai. So it will be interesting to watch this. 2 other important personalities that need to be mentioned, and that, of course, is the governor, TYT Musa Aman, who is, I would say, an important gatekeeper in political science. We talk about people who determine outcomes. He is the gatekeeper at Buklet in the Istana, who will form the government and what coalitions are going to likely come together. His family has at least 7 or 8 different people contesting in the election. We'll see this finalized on nomination day. It's not just about Musa Aman, the individual, but it's also Musa Aman, the family bloc. We also have other powerful families, many warlords that play a role. The Bahanda family, who is another powerful personality reshaping politics in northern Sabah. His brother and his sister are contesting many of the others under the KDM banners. The sister, if she contests, under the PJRS banner. So this is quite an interesting thing to watch of powerful personalities. Politics in Sabah is very much determined by powers of personality and persona. The calon factor, the candidate factor, becomes important, in part because of the deals that I mentioned that have created a sense that party loyalties are being shaped by elites, but not necessarily clearly branding, but also because politics in Sabah is highly personalized. Many people are watching to see who are people that are coming out and who will be contesting and what their relationship and perceptions of those calons are. In looking at Sabah politics, let's talk about some of the drivers of politics. Generally, we can say at a broad scope that there are 3 drivers of politics: spirit or emotions, such as nationalism, such as local party identity. The idea of supporting a local party is very strong in Sabah this particular time. The role of different types of nationalism among different communities. The opposition traditionally relies on these sense of emotions, whether or not the parties have performed, whether or not it's time to bring about change. The mode on the ground, often voters will tell you, tukar, change. And this is a part of the spirit. Star Party, led by Jeffrey Kittingan, is emphasizing the role of Sabah nationalism, for example, as are other parties in various ways, including Warasan. A second driver of politics has been the role of machinery and role of resources. Money matters in Sabah. You can't get voters to come out. You can't afford to take a day off of work, so you have to pay. Transportation costs in Sabah are much higher because Sabah is a much bigger place. Also, machinery, it's much more expensive logistically because of the cost and because of the conditions in Sabah itself. So these issues of machinery and resources matter, and let us not underestimate it. Some contests of these 73 seats can cost as much as 6 million. Minimum is working at $500,000, even in the urban areas for contesting. Politics is a money business because, of course, people are contesting hoping to make money, but at the same juncture, it costs quite a considerable amount. Personality, I've mentioned earlier, the persona of an individual, the ability of a certain candidate to go to the ground, to connect, and what that person represents, often sometimes tied to ethnic loyalties. Then we see party loyalties, this idea of local party or the traditional ties to parties like PBS or UMNO. What we're seeing is the GRS government working very hard under Hajiji to redefine their party identity and shape. Another key factor is the role of government, saying that there will be providing help and assistance in that sense of reducing risk. So we have contending governments, federal government, state government, and the perception that they will win government, all being played out on the ground. Not to be left out are the important role of issues. Everywhere you go in Sabah, the Justice for Zawa flag flies on sheets, stickers on cars. It represents not questions of just for Zawa and the tragic death that happened for her, but also the questions of marginalization, the questions of education. Most people from outside look at the questions of corruption. This issue is not as salient except in the urban areas because corruption has become very prominent in Malaysian politics and Sabah included. If there is one issue that people consistently talk about are the basic needs, what I call Sabah human rights, the rights to have good roads, education, water and Wi-Fi and representation, of the communities, but particularly these basic practical things that are so sorely lacking in Sabah. And this creates high levels of resentments and reflects a much stronger demanding electorate. We also have the political economy issues, questions that are tied into that, of questions of development, and for individuals, the questions of surviving and managing and negotiating the vulnerability that many Sabahans face. If you want to look more carefully at voting behavior, I will have a piece out on Malaysia Kini looking at issues of how voters have transformed. I want to pull out 4 things in this conversation: the role of the youth, which are 1/3 of the electorate. These are groups that I'm watching very carefully. Also, the role of education and income, where we can see narratives of state nationalism and more anger towards the incumbent government is more persistent in the urban areas, particularly among higher incomes. Then the role of ethnic communities. The Chinese comprise 15%, and there is clearly a Chinese swing taking place. The KDM electorate is highly divided, but there's also other important communities such as the Bugis, the Sunai, that are also important swing votes that will help to shape the outcome. We have the question of geography in terms of interior seats, rural areas versus more urban areas. These things matter because it affects the personal relationship and the types of parties that are contesting. Keep in mind that Sabah politics are driven by personality, regional identity, as well as ethnic configuration in particular factors. So as I look at the 73 seats, I'll be dividing these hot seats into 8 different regional zones. Right now, only a handful of seats are safe. The election is a highly competitive one. Over 2/3 of the seats are very competitive. Almost 30% of the seats can swing on very close margins. This is going to be an exciting election to watch. While GRS is favored overall in terms of the numbers right now, Warisan is favored in its areas. Different parties have their political base. That's why it's important to look at Sabah politics not as the totality, but also to look at it at a seat-by-seat basis and to recognize that the local will shape the state will shape the dynamics. Sabah politics will have its own impact on the federal government. So, Sabah goes to polls. It is excitement to watch indeed. Thanks for following me here. We're going to start conversations now about the 8 different sub-regions within Sabah and the hot seats that we should be looking at. This is Bridget Welsh with Kerusi Panas, Sabah.